Okay, welcome to day two of the NFL draft. It's just me here tonight on my own. No Kenny or Jackson tonight, but I'm just going to try and go through the second round at least until Seattle's made their two picks. As soon as the two picks are made in, I'm going to shut this down and then go and write a piece on it. But um, thought we'd have a little bit of fun with this tonight as well. Thought last night went pretty well. If you have any questions you want to send them in via Twitter to @RobState, and I'll try and answer as many of those as possible. So what are the Seahawks going to do then tonight? We've talked about on the blog, some of the options that they've got left. There's a lot of wide receivers on the board. Thought that there maybe would be more than the 5 that went off the board in the first round. Thought there may have been about 7 or 8 that would go. So there's still some good guys on there. Dante Moncrief and Martavis Bryant are 2 explosive options. Cody Latimer's still there. How far is Mark Easley going to fall in this draft? So you've got plenty of options for Seattle at number 40. A lot of people like Jordan Matthews, not my favorite player, but he's a gritty, competitive player, very athletic, big hands, decent length. So he's the kind of player that Seattle could essentially go for. A little bit finesse for my liking, but he's going to be an option for them. Whether they take an offensive tackle or not is going to come down to their impression of Michael Bowie. What do they think of Michael Bowie? Do they see him as the type of guy that they can build around for years to come? Do they feel like he can develop into a starter? Or is he going to strictly be the kind of guy who can fill in at certain times, can potentially play guard as well, or do they see him as someone who could legitimately play at either left tackle, right tackle, who could start right tackle for many years, or at least the extent of a rather cheap contract? Is he the kind of player that Tom Cable feels like he can further develop? And he does need development. He struggled at times last year when he started with Giacomini out. The St. Louis game on the road, it's very tough coming up against that pass rush, but he did struggle. He struggled against the Arizona Cardinals. And you can say, yeah, they're 2 really good defenses, but they're 2 good defenses that are going to take up a quarter of the schedule every year. So, and San Francisco's pass rush is pretty good as well, and he don't think he got a chance to face those guys. So, is he good enough? That's the question you have to ask. I don't think they're going to take a pure guard. If they feel he's good enough, they ain't going to take a right tackle at number 40 here. If they feel that they can upgrade that area, then Morgan Moses, Cyrus Kwanjo, and Joel Bitonio are options. I like Bitonio because he can play at guard. And, when I say I don't think they're going to take a pure guard, what I really mean is I don't think they're going to take someone who can only play guard. They may well bring in a guy like Bitonio who can play guard or tackle, and then they've got the flexibility there. He can play left tackle as well. Someone who can play multiple spots. What I mean is, Xavier Suafilo could only play one spot, and that is guard. There's very little versatility there. I don't think they're going to make that kind of investment on just one position player on the offensive line. I think they could make it for a guy like Bitonio, but again, it's going to come down to how they feel about Michael Bowie. Aside from that, defense, not a lot of options left. What are they going to do there? Are they going to consider Rashid Hageman, whose tape is awful for the most part, but has got the physical skills that they might look for? Would they consider a pass rusher like Demarcus Lawrence? I don't see the likes of Jernigan and Ely and Lewis Nix and players like that as being realistic because they're not special athletes. And Stephon Tuitt, is a big guy and is athletic for his size, but is he, the type of player that this team goes for? Again, I'm not entirely sure. So, they're going to have some options there. I believe that Houston are on the clock now, so we'll run through each pick. If you do have any questions, send them to me on Twitter. You can find my Twitter handle above the little video here, and you can also post on the blog as well. I can get those messages as well, so if you've got any questions, you can send them in there, and we can go through the second round and see what the Seahawks are going to do here. It could be pretty interesting. So right now, Houston on the clock, 4 minutes, 17 to go. A lot of people say that Lewis Nix was going to be the pick here rather than a quarterback, which I could certainly see. Nix is not a really special nose tackle like maybe Dontari Poe was in 2012. He's not got that incredible speed. He's had weight issues. He looks out of shape, whereas Dontari Poe looked like a big tackle. Lewis Nix looks out of shape, so he's going to have to monitor that. I'm not entirely sure that he's going to be able to do that throughout the course of his career. Um, but you can plug him in there, and he's going to be a force. And when you've got J.J. Watt, you've got Jadeveon Clowney, you've got Whitney Merciless, and you've got the pass rushing options that they have, if you can put a nose tackle in there who can come in and start pretty quickly, and be productive, then you've got you've got a shot at being a really really strong defense. And it won't mean for anything if they don't get a decent starter at quarterback. And the reports now is that Ryan Mallett isn't going to be available for selection. Um, I, that is going to be the big thing for Houston, isn't it? Can they get a quarterback into that team who can make it work? And right now they don't have that guy. You can have the best defense in the world. If you have not got the quarterback, then you're going to struggle. It's going to be interesting to see how many receivers actually leave the board, if any, before number 40. I mean, what we have is Houston at 33, Washington at 34, Cleveland at 35 probably are going to consider a wide receiver more than they would have done before today's news, which if you've missed, is that Josh Gordon is facing a year-long suspension. So, they have a good day yesterday getting Johnny Manziel and getting a bit of identity into that offense, and then the next day they lose their best wide receiver. You would think that they'd have to consider one there because they haven't got a lot else apart from that. Greg Little is not gonna be Johnny Manziel's version of Mike Evans at the next level. So I think they're going to have to go for a receiver there. Will they go for Marquise Lee? There has been some suggestions that could be the case. Or, I mean, are they going to go for, a Jake Matthews and Allen Robinson? Would they go for Cody Latimer? A lot of different options there. Oakland, a lot of people saying Derek Carr. Atlanta, you wouldn't think they would go with a receiver, and same with Tampa Bay having taken Mike Evans, but Jacksonville have drafted Blake Bortles, and they could potentially look at one. So there are maybe two or three teams in those first 6 or 7 picks who may well consider it. There's also been talk about Houston trading this pick, but Houston have actually made a selection. So the Texans pick is in, and in a minute or so we'll find out who they're taking it. And all of the talk, when you get a situation like this, and all of the talk is about it's going to be Lewis Nix, you can kind of get a feel that that is what the pick is going to be. When you have a night like that, this is who it's almost beneficial for the team to make it aware who they're going to take. We're going to take this guy. If you really want him badly enough, then come up and get it. These are the teams that are following. If we're not taking a guy that you think we can get someone similar later on, maybe you want to jump a team or two. But it looks as if Houston are gonna make their pick, and then it will be Washington on the board for the first time. So I'm watching the NFL Network feed right now, and they're talking about the Josh Gordon situation and him being out for the year. I mean, he's such a talented receiver. I mean, you see what he did last year, and there's maybe one or two players in this draft class who are similar to him, who've got the same size, who've got the same kind of speed, playmaking quality. But you just think he had the world at his feet after last year. He could have gone on and been an elite receiver over the next few years, and he's getting Johnny Manziel. I mean, he did it last year with the Brian Hoyers and the rabble of quarterbacks that they had there at Cleveland. Imagine having Johnny Manziel to throw to instead, and he is going to throw it a lot, and he's just blown it because he can't stay away from drugs. It appears so. Here is the Houston Texans pick. So Chester Pitts is going to make the Houston Texans selection here. Walter Jones is going to be doing the number 64 selection. He may well do the number 40 as well. Oh, that's interesting. So the Texans did not go for the nose tackle. They took Xavier Suafilo, UCLA guard, not a player that I'm incredibly positive about. I mean, he at times is good. You know, he's quick on his feet. He can shift around. He has got power. He is a natural. You know, as a big guy, he's an athlete. But there are some concerns. You watch the Stanford game, and he gets pushed around. Now, the Stanford game's a good tape to watch because they'll run and they'll run and they'll run at you. And he was getting shoved around a little bit there, and he was getting taken off his spot, and he didn't look entirely comfortable in that game. He's for me out of shape. I mean, I'm watching they show game highlights now on the NFL Network, and what he looked like at the combine and what he looked like on tape, you know, is pretty different. He had a pear-shaped body, which did worry some teams. You know, ideally he gets rid of that, and he sort of refines himself a little bit. There's actually been a trade at number 34, so Washington will not be making a pick at 34. There's been a trade. There was speculation that there would be a number of trades in the first handful of picks as teams kind of chase the defensive lineman. Because as I was talking in the blog post earlier, the depth is so weak on the pass rush positions as defensive end, defensive tackle that if you want one, you better get up there quick because second half of the second round, there's not going to be any options there. And Dallas have traded up to number 34. Jerry Jones is high-fiving, and they look very pleased themselves in the Dallas war room. Dallas, who took Zach Martin in the first round. So a trade has been made. The number 34 pick now belongs to Dallas. And that is a drop to the middle of the round for Washington, who may well felt that it was, you know, acquiring picks was a good idea at this stage. The thing for me is that there's a drop-off in talent at about 45. So, you know, maybe they dropped a little bit too far in that instance. They've given up a third-round pick, Dallas. And the Redskins are now going to pick 47. So Dallas paid quite a lot, and presumably this is going to be a defensive lineman. So they gave up their third-round pick, which is number 78, Dallas. So on the NFL Network, they're talking about, is it going to be Demarcus Lawrence, who this is kind of the range where you'd expect him to go. I think that if they want an edge rusher, that is the best option. If they want interior guys, then you know I'm not really over the moon about the options that they have. Perhaps they could put Lewis Nix next to Henry Melton and get really firm up that interior. That's an option. But Coney Ely is better inside than he is outside, and I'm not thrilled about his prospects inside. Timmy Jernigan is overrated for me. Late second, third round type of guy. Not better than Brandon Mebe. So Dallas have made their selection. I don't know what the delay is. They've got a phone out. They've talked to the guy. Rashid Hageman's name's now. Mike Mayock's thrown that into the mix, so it's possible. You would think that would potentially be an idea that they could go with. So Jerry Jones just having a conversation with the guy they're taking. Brad has got in touch on Twitter and he says, need some quarterbacks to go off the board for our Hawks. Really hope this trade back doesn't bite them. I don't think the trade back's going to bite them too much. I mean, there was guys that, we've spent a lot of time talking about. We've talked about, Latimer and Petonio and how good they would be for Seattle at 32. But the fact is they're still there. And, Dallas are not going to take Petonio. They're not going to take Latimer here, presumably. So then you start to look down the rest of the list. Cleveland may take Cody Latimer. It may happen, but maybe they take Marquise Lee. Maybe they take one of the other receivers. Then those guys are still on the board. Oakland are not going to. Sounds like they're zoned in on Derek Carr. That's what all the speculation is. So then you look at Atlanta. They're not going receiver. Tampa Bay's not going receiver. You're looking at Jacksonville. And in terms of Petonio, I'm not sure that Oakland, Atlanta would go that direction. Tampa Bay possibly. Tampa Bay could upgrade at guard, and if they see Petonio as a guard, then they could be a threat there. Jacksonville have invested big at guard. They signed Beatles, didn't they, from Denver last year, so they've spent some money there. So I think there's a chance for Seattle here to still get one of those, at least one of those. Both guys might be on the board. One of them should be there, I would imagine. So you can kind of understand why this trade could still work out for Seattle. You get a guy you're going to take at 32 anyway. At 40, you get that fourth round pick, and as we've seen, when it gets to the fourth, fifth, even the sixth round, the Seahawks can find starters in that range. So now we're going to find out the Dallas pick at number 34. So there's going to be like a former player announcing the selections for each team. It just delays everything so much more. So the pick for Dallas is Demarcus Lawrence. They went with the edge rusher, which was the better idea for me. The better idea because the interior guys overrated. Chewett, Jernigan, Ely, I'm going to consider him as an inside guy. Overrated players. Demarcus Lawrence can get after the quarterback. Watch him against Nevada. He didn't take on Joel Bitonio. Funny enough, he took on the right side, dominated. Like, really quarterback. Tough to replace Demarcus Ware, but they needed to get someone who could do this. He was the best one left, and there's not a lot of guys left. So I can understand this pick for Dallas, and his hand technique is good. That is a really underrated aspect of defensive end. It's not just about the speed. He ran a 4.8, but he had a pretty good 10-yard split. Let's have a look at what his 10-yard split was at the combine. So he ran a 4.80, but had a 10-yard split of 1.62. So that is impressive. Coney Ely ran a 4.92. His split's 1.72. So it's 0.10 seconds slower than Demarcus Lawrence's. That get-up is the vital thing. How many bench reps did Lawrence? Did 20 reps on the bench as well, which is pretty impressive. Again, Coney Ely, who weighs 20 pounds more than Demarcus Lawrence, had only 2 extra reps. So when you're kind of comparing the two players, you can understand why Dallas goes with Demarcus Lawrence instead of a Coney Ely or one of those interior guys. And Timmy Jernigan, it's not just the fact that he's overrated. I mean, he was the talk that he failed the drugs test at the combine as well, which is a lingering issue there. So people are responding in the comments section on the blog. If you want to make a point or if you want to ask a question, then feel free. This is from SD Coog. It says, regarding Josh Gordon, with news that Cleveland's brass has been aware for 2 weeks, does the league also share the information with other teams, or are they just now finding out this afternoon? Like the rest of us, curious that the news could greatly change the team's draft strategy depending on the way they think Cleveland's needs are and were. There has been some talk that Cleveland knew a couple of weeks ago, and then there's been counter reports on Twitter over the last half an hour that they didn't actually know until this report came out. I think it was an ESPN report that came out. That's when that's when it all became official. The league only makes these things official at a certain point. So that might just be the league covering itself a little bit there, because you make a good point. It really could. If you keep this news quiet and then it comes out right now that maybe teams are thinking they're going to go in a different direction with their pick, and then there's an about turn and all of a sudden they're going to do something else. So it can impact the draft at a situation like this. But at the same time, if Seattle is going to complain about the fact that they've traded down, they decided to trade down, they could have made a pick at 32. So I don't think that any teams could have any really strong complaints. Kenny says, great pick for Dallas. Demarcus Lawrence should be great on the strong side. Hope they can coach him up. Demarcus Lawrence was someone we mocked to Seattle as one of the options that we did a few weeks ago. The thing that really put me off for Lawrence in Seattle was that 4.840, because even though his 10-yard split is good, they like athletes. And if you're running a 4.8 at 250 pounds, you're not a sensational athlete. So I think that's probably one of the reasons why we moved away from that. But he could have easily been an option at 32, depending on what they were thinking about. I just think that if you sort of believed in Demarcus Lawrence and you were willing to take him at 32, then you probably would have done that and not risked it for a fourth rounder, because now that Seattle has moved down to number 40, the 8th pick in the second round, um, you're not expecting to get a pass rusher at that point. I don't think you are anyway. I think that chance came and went with Dominique Easley at 29. I think you have to look in a different direction now. So the Browns are on the clock now. We've had a Big D has got in touch. He says he's going to post comments on here. Says thanks for doing this solo, Rob. No better analysis anywhere. Really appreciate that. Look, guys, I really appreciate you. You know, any of you that are actually listening to this tonight, I appreciate that you're with us. I appreciate everything that you've done to help build this community up. You know, it's a pleasure being able to write about the draft. You know, I'm not in this to be right or wrong about stuff or for people to say, you know, you got this pick right or well, great call on these guys. I just enjoy the NFL draft. I enjoy college football, and you know, as a huge fan of the Seahawks, to be able to combine those three things and create a community where we can all talk about them, I just think it's a really great thing. And you know, it's incredible how many people visited the blog this year and help contribute to make this a great community. And there's no bickering as well. There's no argument. You know, there's debates, but there's no arguments and bickering and swearing and stuff like that. So it's just been another great year. Eric says, not certain if you're reading these, Rob, but if so, well, I am going to read these, Eric. So thanks for your message. He says, if the Hawks can't find a trade partner at 40, and assuming all the relevant players are still on the board, who do you choose? Personally, because of the fact that there are so many receivers still on the board, I'm thinking at this point that maybe you wait till 64. And I say that, you know, even if Latimer's there, I'm a huge Cody Latimer fan, but it's about finding value, isn't it? And if you can get a good receiver at 64, and if you can get a Joel Bitonio at number 40 and fill two spots, I think that's better. If you go receiver at 40, then at 64, you know, what are you going to do? The receiver might be the best player on the board at that point. So, you know, do you take two? I don't think it's likely. So we'll see. A lot of people saying Stanley Jean-Baptiste, like Mike Mayock had him in his mock at 32. That'd be a consideration. Anyway, the Browns pick is in. Joel Bitonio is going to be a Cleveland Brown. Joel Bitonio selected by Cleveland. So a player that we talked an awful lot about on the blog. It's always a little bit disappointing when you see one of the guys that, you know, you invested a lot of time watching and talking about and debating whether they'd be good for Seattle, and you see them leave the board. Joel Bitonio would have been a great pick for the Seahawks. It's a shame he's gone to Cleveland. So a little bit of a surprise given what we know about Josh Gordon and the news that he's potentially going to miss all 16 games next year, face a 16-game suspension. You'd think maybe they would go with receiver, but they're not. They've taken Bitonio. I guess they're going to slot him inside. Play him next to Alex Mack and Joe Thomas. That would just be some interior. I mean, he could play right tackle, but I just think that, you know, they maybe had a bigger need at guard. You put Bitonio in there. It's just going to be a really good pick for them. And if they want to keep Manziel, you know, relatively clean, despite the fact he's going to scramble and get out of the pocket, that's just a really, really solid pick for Cleveland. So Joel Bitonio's gone. What do we do at 40 now? You know, the option of going Bitonio and receiver then is gone. Demarcus Lawrence is gone. All signs point towards a receiver now at number 40, unless they're going to, you know, pull one out of the bag with Sean Baptiste at the corner, or do something that is just completely surprising. I think that is probably the thing they're going to do is go for that receiver now, and there are some good ones there. So Marquise Lee's still on the board. He's got past Cleveland. There was a report on Twitter that half the teams in the league have taken him off their draft board because they're just concerned about his knee situation. You know, have the Seahawks done a thorough research of Lee's knees? You know, did they ever think that he would be available at 32? Because, you know, you might say, well, the teams have all the information. Carolina admitted that in the 2010 draft, they'd not fully scouted Jimmy Clausen, or they hadn't done all of the checks they would have done if they, you know, were going to felt that they had a real good chance of taking him, because they never expected him to be in round 2. So they'd done, you know, a lot of basic work on Jimmy Clausen, but they didn't necessarily believe he was going to be there. It was a surprise. They took him, took a chance on him, and you know, that pick obviously didn't work out as a consequence. You know, Marquise Lee, have the Seahawks got every little bit of information that they will need, compared to like a Kansas City or a Philadelphia, who would have thought, hey, you know, we've got a chance of getting Marquise Lee. We'll go and do all the research that we need. You know, do the Seahawks have are they in a confident enough position where they can say, well, hang on a minute, 35 teams have passed on Marquise Lee, who's an exceptional player. There's got to be something wrong here. So that is something that's going to have to come into your mind. The Oakland pick is in. They're now going to make that pick. So we're getting close to to the Seahawks being on the clock again. This will be the 4th pick of the night, so we'll be halfway to the number 40 pick. A lot of people saying Derek Carr for the Oakland Raiders. Like, it's great seeing the reaction on the blog, by the way, to Bitonio going. Oh my God, there goes Bitonio. No, Bitonio. So here's the Raiders pick. So Derek Carr is going to the Oakland Raiders at number 36. And Matt Smith on the NFL Network feed says it had to be. I mean, why did it? And they've spent a draft pick on Bob, and they're paying him millions and millions of dollars. Why did this have to be a quarterback? Yeah, Matt Schaub's not the future, but they've said that, he's our guy for this year, at least, maybe next year as well. And you're going to put Matt Schaub on a field, and who's he throwing to? Who's protecting him? Who's Derek Carr to? It just seems to me like they've gone kind of half to creating a team which is win now, and now they're not fully buying in. I mean, they had a chance to take Mike Evans in the first round, give Schaub a weapon, and they go and take Khalil Mack instead. They're going to have to put some points on the board next year. You're going up against Phillip Rivers and the Chargers. You're going up against the Denver Broncos and Peyton Manning. Now, you need to score some points. There's going to be games where you're going to have to put points on the board. So, I'm not entirely sure what is, what their overall plan is. Let's sort of consider some of the, the outside options that maybe, we're getting up to number 40 now. Seattle, famed for taking players nobody expects. We talked about Stanley Jean-Baptiste and Mike Mayock mocked him at number 32 to Seattle in the first round. Would they consider him? Perhaps other options. I like Brandon Coleman. I think he's got a lot of potential. I'd love to see the Seahawks, invest in that sort of big 6'6", 225 pounds wide receiver who can, run away from defenders. Just an incredible, incredible talent. Would love to see that. It would be an out there pick, though. A lot of people say, there's this guy on the board, this guy on the board, but that would be the kind of sort of size, unique size, athleticism kind of pick that Seattle is known for. Brent Urban is another one who is a fan. We talked about the options in the interior defensive line. Good. Well, Brent Urban is an option where, he is a really, really talented player. And, he's kind of gone under the radar because of the health situation, hasn't been healthy, has been banged up, and if he had been healthy and if he'd completed the Senior Bowl and if he'd been at the Combine and he'd had a good pro day, I think a lot of people will be talking about him right now. So Atlanta is now on the clock and their pick is coming up, it is in. So, what are they going to do? Are they going to go for a pass rusher here? Because it seemed like it was pass rusher or tackle in round one. Do they go for a tight end? No Tony Gonzalez anymore. So do they consider a Jay Samaro? Do they go for Austin Safarian Jenkins? What is their thinking going to be here? Matt says, Rob, thanks a ton for the broadcast, watching ESPN on mute while listening to your analysis. I've always been curious about how you got so interested into the NFL and Hawks on the other side of the pond. At some point during the downtime here, perhaps you can share a little about your story. The reason why I started following the Seahawks was I always was an NFL fan, always followed the league, but never had a reason to follow one team in particular. I had a chance to go to a game whenever I've travelled over to the States. I'd not had a chance to go to a game. And my feeling was that I want to go to a stadium, watch a team, get that connection, and then have a reason for following that team, or at least have a connection with the cities and wanting to support their team. And I've not had a chance to have that, so I kind of just followed the league, didn't have a team. In 2006, I went out to live in Vancouver, traveled to Seattle many times, went and watched the Mariners lose 10-0 against the Blue Jays. Went another time and watched the Sonics take on the Spurs and lost again. And we went back a third time, and I said, I really want to watch a Seahawks game. And it was Monday Night Football against Green Bay in the snow. Sean Alexander had about 200 rushing yards that day. Matt Hasselbeck and Jeremy Stevens were playing well that night. And it was just the whole feeling about the atmosphere, the way that the 12th man was prioritised, and the 12th man flag, and the fans were great, and I had such a good time that I said, that's my team. And ever since then, I've just been a huge Seahawks fan. I'll always love college football. I just had an idea one day, you know what, there's no draft blog out there. I'm going to start one. I'm going to see how it goes. Never expected I'd be doing it 6 years later, and here we are. And, I just it's been tough at times to keep it going with the birth of my son 7 months ago, and it's been pretty tiring. But there's no way I could give it up. And again, that's pretty much down to the community that we've created here. So yeah, that's pretty much the story. And I've been addicted to the Seahawks ever since that game, and I've not missed a single game since. I've travelled over there all the time. I'm going to be travelling out to Seattle again this year. I think to go and watch the Giants game to celebrate my 30th birthday, which is in June. I'm going to wait a few months and then go and celebrate that in Seattle, probably with my brother. So yeah, that is basically why I'm so addicted to the Seahawks. The pick is in for Atlanta. We're still waiting to find out what it is. Bill says Trent Murphy, defensive end from Stanford, seems like a Seahawks type guy. Maybe this round. See, I had to disagree a little bit there. I don't see him as a Seahawks type of guy. I mean, first of all, what is he? What is Trent Murphy? He's an outside linebacker for Stanford who has always been an effort guy. Had big production last year, but was not, that special kind of unique athlete. He ran a 4.86 at 250 pounds. So he's not a big guy. He's running in the near 4.9s. 10-yard split wasn't too bad in the 1.6s, but he's not strong. 19 reps on the bench. Decent vertical, 35.5, but again, he's not the biggest guy. And although he had all of that production, I mean, where would he start for Seattle? He doesn't look like a Leo. He's not a speed, quick twitch guy off the edge. He can't round that edge. I mean, he is a power effort guy, a little bit like Scott Richardson. So I wouldn't say that he'd necessarily be a Seahawky kind of guy. I think there are more, players who fit that bill. I think Brent Urban's one of those. He's got the length, the strength, the speed, that interior pressure, and there are other guys, the receivers that we've talked about who would fit more that bill. So here we go. Here's going to be the Atlanta pick, which would put the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the board at 38. So here's the Falcons pick. Right, so Rashid Hageman is off the board now. He's been taken by Atlanta at the 37th pick, so Hageman is gone. They needed a pass rusher. He is a big guy. 6'6", over 300 pounds. I mean, if anybody was disappointed that he's gone to Atlanta, what I would say is go and watch the Wisconsin game. I watched it yesterday as just sort of final last few checks, on guys that might fall to Seattle. Became convinced that, Hageman, who I thought might go to New England at 29, when I was convinced that Easley would go there and mock that. Hageman, he was like, is he going to be an option for Seattle at 32? And he may well have been an option for them because of the upside that he's got. But go and watch that Wisconsin game. They always field a really good offensive line in Wisconsin, always. And this guy just had a nightmare against them. He just couldn't get penetration. He had one play one play against the running back in the backfield. And when he in that one play, he sheds one block, explodes into the backfield, takes off another, and hammers the running back. And you think, where is that, the rest of the time? Why are you not doing this on a more consistent basis? Watch Dominique Easley, watch Aaron Donald and the way that they play at their size, and then you watch Aikman and you think he should be just like them, and he's not. He can play inside and out, so he's going to be versatile for Atlanta. But if they're banking on him providing a consistent pass rush against Drew Brees and Cam Newton, then I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure if that is going to be the answer for them. But they're at a stage now where the options for pass rushers are not great, so they may be willing to gamble a little bit on upside and versatility, and that's what they've gone for. So that's another potential Seahawks player off the board. You're looking now and you think, Lewis Nix is still there. At what point is he going to come off the board now? Timmy Jernigan, what time is he going to come off the board? It would be nice if those guys were off before Seattle, because then it's just going to push other players down there. Marquise Lee's still there. Cody Latimer's still there. Joel Bitonio's gone. Cyrus Kwanjo's still there. If you want to, think that the knee issue is not going to be an issue for you. I mean, there was a report, and you'll find the tweet from me and Rappaport on my blog, on the blog article underneath this live feed, where he mentioned. Let me dig it out, and I can read it to anybody who may miss that. And he's got a quote from. He's got a source from within the Alabama medical room talking about the situation with the knees. Here it is. Lyle Kane is the doctor's name from Alabama. Cyrus Kwanjo doesn't even notice his knee is an issue during practice. He rarely misses work or time on the field. So he's okay for now, but in 5 or 6 years, the knee issue could be a problem. And that is kind of the balancing act with Cyrus Kwanjo. That is the balancing act you will need to make. Because in 5 years' time, he's going to need, 4 years, he's going to need a new contract. And if he plays really well for 4 years, and then you're in a position where you're going to say, well, we don't want to give you a new contract because we fear that your needs may not last another 2 seasons even, and he goes somebody else and somewhere else and plays another 5 years, then that is a very, very awkward situation for a team to put themselves in. A lot of teams won't want to deal with that. Other teams may think, for 4 years, I'll take a really, really good tackle who could have played left tackle, who could have played right tackle, who would have been a top 20 pick, probably would have been the pick that Miami went with if he didn't have this knee injury. I'd just take him for 4 years. A good team may well do that. It wouldn't be a bad option for the Seahawks. I love his attitude. I love the way he speaks. I love his backstory. But it's just about the knees, isn't it? Morgan Moses is still there. Kind of a cumbersome big tackle who played well against some pass rushers, and I mentioned this a few times on the blog, against Vic Beasley, just looked exhausted. Just looked like he was. I mean, Beasley's a great speed rusher, but you don't want to see your left tackle looking absolutely knackered with about midway through the third quarter. You want to see him sort of keeping up with the guy and battling and fighting and scratching, not looking like he wants to get off the field and find a gas tank. So. Sean says, is Lee's knee an issue for us, or could he be the receiver we take at 40? I heard a lot of teams took him off their board completely. It'll really depend on how bad that knee injury is. It always makes me wonder, why would half the teams in the league take him off the board and half keep him on there? If surely his knees either an issue enough for all teams to say, I'm going to pass until like the 3rd or 4th, 5th round, as we saw with Jesse Williams, or he's okay and this is just a ridiculous drop. We're at the point now where teams like Cleveland are passing on Marquise Lee and they need a receiver desperately. And if he gets to 40, I'm almost at the point where I say, I don't know if I want this guy anymore, because those teams are passing on him. There must be some issue there. The last thing Seattle wants is to bring in this potentially explosive playmaker, and he never plays it down for the Seahawks, or he plays a couple of games and he's out. I mean, we already have enough injury-prone wide receivers on this team. Sidney Rice, how many games is Sidney Rice going to play before his next injury? How many games is Percy Harvin going to play next year? Is he going to play a full year? Doug Baldwin, in fairness to him, has been banged up a few times. The last thing Seahawks need is another guy who is going to be injured. So you've got to bear that in consideration. There are other good receivers as well that the Seahawks could go for. But defensive line, offensive line, the options are getting weaker here. So the Bucs pick is in. They will almost certainly not go receiver with Vincent Jackson and now Mike Evans on their roster. You maybe think they could go defense here. They went tight end, which was also a popular pick. So Austin Seferian-Jenkins of Washington is a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. So local guy. And ASJ is going to go to Tampa Bay. It's a good spot for him, that. They are kind of building an offense that is similar to Chicago's. You know, they have Martellus Bennett. They've got the two big outside receivers. And now that is what they're going to have. You know, clearly Lovie Smith, who was in Chicago, has had some influence on that. I think he was still at the team when they drafted Alshon Jeffrey. You know, they obviously had a plan for an offense there with Jay Cutler. And now he's kind of trying to put that together again. You know, Vincent Jackson is always going to put up your yards. Josh McCown's going to love him. Mike Evans, absolutely positive, is going to come in and have an impact. You've got those two big bodies outside, and now you put Austin Seferian-Jenkins running the seam. That is a really good looking passing game there. Even with Josh McCown, you know, that's the type of situation. If you're going to use a guy like Josh McCown, who is not the most talented or accomplished quarterback, you know, who's getting on in years, then that is what you need. You need to surround him with talent. It's been a knockout draft so far for Tampa Bay. And they'll play tough defense for Lovie there. They've made some big picks in free agency. They've made some good draft picks here today. They're heading in the right direction. And you know what? In the red zone, they are going to be tough to stop. You've got three big bodies there who can be productive in the red zone. Whether they run it, and they're going to be run blocking, or whether they throw it, and you're just going to throw it up there for those guys. They are going to look good. They have got some size. So Seferian-Jenkins off the board. Just to recap who's gone so far. Su'a-Filo went to the Texans at 33. Demarcus Lawrence at 34. Joel Bitonio, unfortunately, went to Cleveland at 35. Derek Carr to the Raiders at 36. Rashid Hageman, 37 to the Falcons. And Seferian-Jenkins to the Buccaneers at 38. And now Jacksonville's pick is in, which means Seattle is on the clock. So we're going to find out any minute now who the Seahawks are going to be taking in this first round. And this is where Marquise Lee leaves the board. So the Jaguars take Marquise Lee, one pick before the Seahawks are on the clock. We'll never know whether the Seahawks would have been willing to take Marquise Lee. But he's gone to the Jaguars to work with Blake Bortles. That's a smart pick. I'm hearing that the Seahawks have traded down again, and the Lions have moved up to number 8. The Seahawks will now drop down to 40. So the Seahawks drop down again from 40 to 45. Clearly they feel that the options that are left on the board, they can still get a good one at 45. I said earlier that I feel like there's a drop-off in talent after 45. So the Seahawks have dropped down to a position where they can perhaps still get a good one. Marquise Lee is off the board. He is such a good player, and if his knees hold up, then Jacksonville are just having another really strong draft, and they needed to get a weapon for Blake Bortles, and now they have it with Marquise Lee. So good for them. Good for them. Seahawks are off the clock. They traded immediately. The Detroit Lions are now in, and they all make a pick at number 40. You do wonder whether or not, some of the guys that the Seahawks were thinking could be there at 40 have gone. Were they looking at Bitonio, for example? I'm positive that they were. Were they considering Marquise Lee? Again, could be. If Jaguars are willing to take him, maybe the Seahawks are willing to take him. Were they considering a Hageman? There's 3 potential players that have left the board. Maybe that is what's prompted the Seahawks to move down. And we're going to have to wait a little bit longer to find out who the Seahawks are going to eventually take in this draft. And I'll be very interested to see what the Seahawks get in return, because, I understand that, You trust John Schneider, you trust Pete Carroll. They're going to trade down. They're going to make good picks. We know that. At the same time, you accumulate some. Eventually, the Seahawks are going to have a draft where they don't find a number of late round starters. Probably had that last year. Luke Wilson was pretty much the only one who contributed in year one. And if you have a couple of drafts where you aren't finding, I'm not saying they're going to find another Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor. If you're not even finding guys who can come in and role play or provide solid depth, if you're just sort of, if you're the next EJ Wilson, for example, or the receiver they took last year from Kansas State, whose name just Chris Harper, of course. You're just cutting off the back. If you're having drafts like that where you're missing on late round picks and you keep trading down, you just wonder, are you hurting yourself? Could you have got a good player? Because when I was talking about at number 40, this guy, this guy's still on the board. Well, they're not on the board anymore. And if you trade to 45, 1, 2, 3 other players may now leave the board as well. So we'll see. I don't think that the front office is so invincible that we shouldn't question anything they ever do. We'll see who they get at 45 and play it from there. But hopefully they got a good one here, and it's not just a 6th rounder or something. Let's wait and see what the Seahawks get. Detroit's pick is in. Just having a look on Twitter to see. Okay, this is what the deal is. Seattle gave away a 5th rounder in exchange for a 4th rounder. The Seahawks had 2 5th rounders, of course. They now get a 4th rounder from Detroit. They lose the 5th rounder and they get a 7th. So essentially they swapped a 5th for a 4th, and they get a 7th rounder as well. So the Seahawks get a grand total of 1 pick from that trade. And they now have 9 picks, and they've never drafted less than 9 times in a draft under Pete Carroll and John Schneider. So they've got a lot of picks. It is a deep, deep draft. There's some good players out there still. But if you are going to keep trading down, you do put pressure on yourself to hit with those late picks. Otherwise, people, look at New England. New England, no one will ever question, Bill Belichick and everything he's achieved. But they traded down every year in New England and had 3 or 4 drafts where they just were hopeless. And they've not improved that team over the last few years in the draft. They've missed opportunities because they have continuously traded down. And there was kind of a shift in mentality. I think in 2012 they actually started to trade up, and they may have done that as well last year, and then maybe just sort of shifted that mentality. They took Dominique Easley. They didn't risk anything. They didn't try and trade back and miss out on Easley to Seattle. And I just wonder if the Seahawks will ultimately find that they missed out on 1 or 2 guys because they were constantly willing to trade back. So if they can hit on those late round picks, fantastic, but it does put a little bit more pressure on you to do that. So let's look at what people are saying on the blog. So this one from Philip Rob, if we take a receiver at 40, what would you expect at 64? I would consider Brent Urban in that spot. Absolutely, I would. If it's not him, then it's a tough one. It depends who would still be there. At that point, is Cyrus Quandro fallen all the way to 64? His knee's that much of a concern. Is Morgan Moses still around? Is there like a guy that Tom Cable really believes in who he can get in and work with? Antonio Richardson, is he going to be an option there? Will Stanley Jean-Baptiste still be there? Do you take 2 receivers? Is running back such a good value at that spot that you even consider doing that? I don't know. There's stranger things have happened. So let's just see how the board. That might be a question that'll be easier to answer when we get to sort of the 50 range. We know who Seattle have taken if they do in fact pick at number 45. A lot of people saying there was a lot of activity in the war room. I'm presuming that's because of what the trade had there. I think another pick is that come. So my little lead a little slower, I think. I still wait pick. So 68, I'm okay with the trade. We get a 4th. We did get a 4th rounder yet, but we gave up a 5th rounder in the process. Michael says, I really don't think Latimer is going to be the pick for the Seahawks. If they really liked him, they wouldn't be getting cute here. Troy says, why do we keep trading back? And where are we picking now? It's number 45. So the Lions pick is in now. So let's see the Detroit Lions take. They went with Eric Ebron in the first round. You would presume this would be defensive back. I mean, their backfield there is poor. They've spent a lot of money and picks. The front 4, they really need to get some corners and safeties into that roster. And having said that, they are not going to take a cornerback or a safety. They're going to take Kyle Van Noy, a linebacker from BYU, who last year, a lot of people were excited about. There was the bowl game. Can't remember who it was against. The bowl game at the end of the 2012 season, where he had something ridiculous like 2 or 3 sacks, an interception, maybe a couple of interceptions. I think he returned one for a touchdown. He's a sparky little playmaker. Always seems to make plays. Not quite as athletic as people thought, though, and that is a concern given that he is small. Some people felt that he would go in the 3rd round as a consequence. Let's look at his measurables, because I can just drag them up here. Kyle Van Noy. So he's 6'3", 243 pounds. At 6'3", you kind of think, he's got length. Only has 31.5-inch arms, so he hasn't got long arms, hasn't got that sort of ideal length to be a pass rusher, for example. He ran a 4.71, but it had a good 10-yard split of 1.60. 21 reps on the bench, 32.5-inch vertical, 9 feet 4 on the broad jump, which is pretty average. So not a blazing athlete, but sometimes he's a football player. He's that kind of like the cliche. He's a football player. There's been a trade at number 41. That was, I think that was Buffalo's pick, and I think it now belongs to St. Louis. That is what is, St. Louis has traded up. So St. Louis will have traded up from number 44. So they were set to pick just before Seattle. They've now jumped ahead of New York and Tennessee to get into Buffalo slot. Buffalo trying to accumulate picks, having given away a 1st rounder next year. So who are the Rams going to go for here? They had a great first day of the draft. And got Greg Robinson, got Aaron Donald. Are they thinking cornerback here? Are they thinking maybe Jean Baptiste? Are they maybe thinking they can add a receiver, on the outside? So there are some options. The thing at a time like this is always to look at who the teams they've jumped. Why would they have jumped them? So New York Giants aren't going to go receiver. Tennessee probably aren't going to go receiver. So who are they going after here? Who's the guy that they have to have? Maybe, you would say that looking at Tennessee and New York Giants, you'd say defense, but St. Louis have spent a lot on defense recently. Could it be a cornerback? I think that would probably be the best guess at this point. Got a message here from, is it Iran or Iran? Apologies if I said that wrong. Says, why would we give up the 5th? That's the best round historically for the Seahawks, with Luke Wilson and Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor. I guess, they just feel that getting that, into that extra round, I'm going to look at the 4th round now and see. Seattle's pick in the 4th round is going to be at number 8 from the Vikings, and then number 11 in the 4th from Detroit. So, let's look at this another way. There's the potential there for the Seahawks to pack. I'm not saying that they're going to do this. We know that John Schneider likes as many picks as possible. But they could pack those 2 picks and get into round 3. Just throwing it out there. They haven't got a 3rd round pick. They've now got 2 4 in the top 15. They've got their own 4th round pick at 32 as well. They've got 3 4th round picks. You could package picks and get into the 3rd if you really wanted to. Or, what kind of guys can be available in the 4th? Everyone says this is a deep draft. I don't think it's quite as deep as people think, but they've got 3 4th round picks, to really play with there, and they'll hope to get some big guys. Andrew, he wonders whether Jean-Baptiste will go, which I think is a decent shout. Since they really must like Moncrief, Bryant, or Coleman, I must assume they're safe moving down. Possibly Latimer as well. Matthews is still there, a guy that I don't like, but a lot of other people do. He doesn't say Steelers do before. They know the sweet spot where they can get their guy, which is very true. They've moved down in the past. They know that the guy is going to be there at 45. They'll do it. The thing for me though is that I think that the fact that they've traded down again suggests that at least one of the guys they were after at number 40 is gone. And perhaps that guy was Joel Bitonio. Perhaps that was the guy that they were going to take at 32, goes at 35 instead. They lose out on him. Marquise Lee going off the board maybe impacted that as well. Rashid Hageman maybe had impact on that. We'll see, but I guess we will never ever know. But the Seahawks are down to the 13th pick in round 2, which number 45. They'll pick just ahead of the Steelers, the Raiders, and the Ravens. They will now select just after the Titans and the Giants and the Bills, and now the Rams pick is in. Made a trip with Buffalo. They moved up a few spots. 41, and we will see what their pick is going to be here. Carry on that momentum that they built up yesterday. That Rams roster is looking pretty dangerous, apart from the most important position. So they've just introduced Kevin Carter to read the draft pick out. And they've got a fan draft experience winner who's going to actually come and read the pick. So it means we have to sit and wait for it to be introduced. And it's 1 in the morning here. That is why I just want them to get on with it. Okay, I'm on with Lamarcus Joyner, which is a bit of a surprise for me. This is the way the Rams seem to draft under Snead. Have some really good picks where you go, yep, I can do it. And I have picks where you just think, I understand. And I don't, Lamarcus Joyner is a nice player to watch in college, and he flies around, and he's always around the ball, and he hits people. But he's tiny, absolutely tiny, not fast. I had him down around Rams take him in round 2, and not only did they take him in round 2, they trade up to take him in round 2, and that is, the kind of thing that I just, this is why they find the Rams to be so hit and miss. Hey, I'm not going to go for the Rams rather than corner. Let's have a look. Lamarcus Joyner, 5'8" exactly, 184 pounds, short arms, 5'5", and that's a 36.5. If it's just me, this is just my preference. If you're 8 and you're 180 pounds and you're running a 4 point, it's just not good enough. Play him, and you want to see that range. You want to see a guy who's flying all over the field. And this is a bit of a head scratcher here. So the Seahawks are on the clock now. Unlike everybody else. My reads are a bit slower than everybody else's. It seems like I'm looking on Twitter. I'm trying not to ruin it. Philadelphia have traded up. It looks as if the problem that you have in this with introducing everybody coming out to announce pick is clock expires. The next team on the clock, then the commissioner comes out with his guy, introduces him. He's fit, Then you have the fan draft winner who announces that by the time all of that's done, the other selections in and another team's on the clock. And now the Seahawks are actually on the clock at 45 and have made it. And yet, we're still waiting to find out who Philadelphia have taken. In fact, we've already just found out that they've traded up. It takes Latimer. didn't, so that's good. Jay says one of Antonio and Ferdinand because their guy's not there. A wide receiver and an offensive lineman with these next 2 picks. KJ Wright was 4th, says Big D. If I recall, we draft well there as well if there is value. PCJS apparently think there is this year. So here's the Eagles pick. They traded up to 42. The Eagles have selected Jordan Matthews. So the Philadelphia Eagles traded up to get Jordan Matthews. A bit of relief, personally, because he's a finesse guy. Great, says all the right things in interviews. You listen to him, he talks about competing, fighting, working for the ball. A lot of people have mentioned this family link to Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice is his mother's first cousin. It is not his cousin. He's not cousins with Jerry Rice. It's his mother who's the cousin of Jerry Rice. So it's a very tenuous link, which, if I had that vague relation to Jerry Rice, and I was a receiver in the draft, I'd be mentioning it as well. But, it's not quite as good as it cracked up to be. Here's the thing with him. The Vanderbilt system produces a lot of passing yards because it's heavily the screen game. You get these teams, they throw it out quickly, they put up huge numbers as a consequence. That was why Matthews put up his numbers. Not saying he's not talented. There was sort of a bit of a feeding in the ball type of situation, though. When he threw it out to the screen or threw it out to the flat and he gets it on the sideline, if he got good blocking, he had the speed to exploit that. If he didn't get good blocking, the play was over. He'd get consistently hit in the backfield for a 2 or 3 yard loss, or he might get back to the line of scrimmage. He had no wiggle, no shake, no yards after the catch ability, taking people on. It's not the biggest thing in the world, but you look at the guys, even Golden Tate. You throw a quick pass out to him, he might make a guy miss and then get an extra few yards. Jordan Matthews never does that. Doesn't high point the ball particularly well. Has some silly drops. Works predominantly in the slot and over the middle. So I'm not disappointed at all to miss out on Jordan Matthews. In fact, it's a relief that he's gone, and not a guy that I was particularly interested in. In fact, the 2 guys that I wasn't interested in, if I was going to put the fan cap on for a while, I wouldn't have wanted them to draft Suafilo and Jordan Matthews, and they've both gone. So it's not the worst situation in the world. The Giants are now on the clock. Then it's the Bills, then it's the Seahawks. We know that the Seahawks, if you're following on Twitter, they've made a pick, and now we just wait for the NFL to catch up. Don says, so the Seahawks value more average players instead of fewer highly talented players. I disagree with this approach. It will lead to an average team. You can't coach up everybody to be all pros. They're going to screw around and lose some good players. Don, I just cannot agree with that. I mean, I don't disagree with the questioning, the constantly trading down for mid-late round picks. But, they're not going to end up with an average team, are they? Because they've found Richard Sherman in the 5th round. They found Cam Chancellor in the 5th round. They found Russell Wilson in the 3rd round. They've built a championship team on those picks. So they're never going to have an average team while those guys are still here. So, whether it's going to put a bit of pressure on them to hit on those later round guys because they've kind of prioritized that this year. But you can't rule out that they're going to hit a few home runs again. I mean, why aren't they going to keep finding all pros in that range? They've done it so consistently so far. But at the same time, I understand why some fans not entirely sure about it. Kind of just want to see a pick come in. They want to see a guy drafted. They see in the favorite players leaving the board. So I understand both sides of the story. So here's the Giants at 43. The Giants have taken Weston Richburg, the center from Colorado State. Many people considered him to be the best center in the draft, ahead of Marcus Martin. Not a player I spent a ton of time on. I'd never expected the Seahawks to draft a center early. Richburg, not a guy I know an awful lot about. There was a lot of other teams that could have targeted that position early on. New Orleans being one of those, San Francisco another. Jacksonville were a team you maybe thought, considering they missed out on Alex Mack and went after him quite heavily, you wondered whether or not that was going to be an option there. But they go for Weston Richburg and New York, and that's where he's going to land. Let's look at some of these other messages that I'm getting here. Troy says, seems if we gained some solid value by trading back and still lots of quality guys still left there. Well, we're now in a situation where the Bills, who just drafted Sammy Watkins, are on the clock, and they are not going to be taking a wide receiver here. They spent all the money on Sammy Watkins. They took Robert Woods last year, Marquise Goodwin. They traded Stevie earlier to San Francisco, but they're not going to draft a wide receiver. So you have got Cody Latimer there. You have got some of the Martavis Bryant. You have got Dante Moncrief. If you're going to take a receiver here, you've got options. You've got Stanley John Baptiste if they want to take another big corner. They have some options there. And there's always the chance of it being a wild card pick. So here's the Bills pick, and then we will have the Seahawks pick as well. So Andre Reed is going to read the Bills pick out here. Okay, so the Bills have taken Cyrus Kwanjo. The Bills take Kwanjo off the board. This is where he falls at number 44, right ahead of the Seahawks pick. They are clearly going all in on offense now. They've got a couple of guys on defense. They re-signed Aaron Williams, even though they lost Jairus Byrd. They are clearly saying, right, we've gone for EJ Manuel. We've made that investment there, and we're going to give it absolutely everything now. So they get Kwanjo as their bookend tackle to go with Cody on the other side. They've got plenty of wide receivers. EJ Manuel has now got no excuse, essentially, and if he doesn't make it work, they're in trouble because they ain't got a 2015 first rounder anymore. The thing with Kwanjo is, if they can get him for 4 or 5 years, it's a really good pick because he is good enough to have gone in the sort of the top 20, 25 easily. And he's fallen because of the knee issue. So if you believe that he is going to spend, some time playing in this league, whether it's just a handful of years, then, that is going to be a decent pick for them. So the Seahawks are now on the clock. Kwanjo's gone. Batonio's gone. Marquis Leah's gone. They're the kind of guys that the Seahawks have missed out on. Farron Jenkins, Hagerman's gone. Jordan Matthews is gone. Demarcus Lawrence is gone. Xavier Suafilo is gone. Who are they going to take here? I'm not going to read any of them just in case any of you spoil the pick or tip the pick at this stage. I'm just going to wait and see what the Seahawks get, and then we'll give a detailed breakdown of the guy they've taken, unless it's a complete unknown. There was high-fiving, celebrating in the war room, as you kind of expect. Not a lot of disappointment. When there's high-fiving and celebrating to a high extent, you kind of wonder if the guy that they did target all along is still there, or at least the guy they targeted at 40 is still good at 45, for example. They may well have missed out on Batonio or Marquis Lee at 40. So we'll see who it is. If they want to go explosive, they've got Bryant and Moncrief. If they want to go, solid possession receiver with plus athleticism and fantastic hands, they've got Cody Latimer. If they want to go tackle, they've got Morgan Moses. There's defensive prospects still on the board as well. The thing with the receiver situation is, and it's a point that a couple of people have made in the run-up to this draft. If you draft a receiver, they're going to have to come in and face the Legion of Boom in training camp and in OTAs and stuff like that, and they're going to have to compete with those guys, and they're going to have the same kind of gritty, determined attitude that a Tate had, or Doug Baldwin definitely has. That Percy Harvin is just an incredible athlete. Sidney Rice has got that gritty attitude. Jermaine Kearse, you can see that a little bit in him as well. Whoever comes in here is going to have to be ready to mix it up. And the one thing with Latimer is he run blocks superbly, so he will get a bit of respect for that. He also, is very physical in the air, and he's not, kind of big personality. And it'd be interesting to see if people get at him how he responds to that. But he can compete for the ball in the air, so He would be a very interesting option, but you just wonder, there's not been a huge departure of receivers going so far at 45. Will they wait to 64? Is there somebody else that they would go for? Matt Millen says defensive lineman. Um, he says that they need defensive line help. I'm not sure they need anything. Um, Charlie Castley's talking about a speed tight end. For starters, who is the speed tight end that he thinks they're going to take? Jason Morrow is not a speed tight end. Troy Nicholas is definitely not a speed tight end. If you're going to go for a tight end here, we're going to carry 4 tight ends next year. They re-signed McCoy, Luke Wilson. They think the world of him. They restructured Zach Miller's contract. They didn't cut him. So if you're going for a tight end here, who's not going to play? Who's not dressing on a game day? I don't understand why you would go with a tight end here, especially one that is not, the second coming of Gronk. People would compare Severian Jenkins to that kind of player, but he's gone. I don't think that Nicholas is that guy. The more I watch the Nicholas, the less I liked. It's a little bit soft. Everyone says he's a great run blocker, but he's not. It's just that he was bigger than everybody else. And people assume that he's a great run blocker because of that, because he didn't put up the big yards. He was no better run blocker for me than some of the other guys, than a Severian Jenkins. So we're still waiting for the pick to come in. We're listening to Matt Millen talk about tight ends here. Although it was interesting that Charlie Castley, he's now speaking. He's the one who suggested Jason Morrow. Is kind of zoned in on that kind of pick. He's mentioned it a few times on the NFL Network going into the draft that they could take a tight end, and I think they're much more likely to go for a split end who can work out wide. Pete's ideal, 6'4", 6'5" guy isn't necessarily there unless they go with Brandon Coleman. We're still waiting to learn what Seattle's pick is. We're still hearing Charlie Castley talk about tight ends on the online feed, which is what I'm watching it on. No access to the NFL Network constant feed, which you guys may be watching on the TV or be watching ESPN. So they are handing back over to the NFL Network for the Seahawks pick. So we're going to hear Mayock's take on who the Seahawks take. And for those who maybe can't watch it and are watching this independent of the TV or whatever, I'll just give you a little review of what they're saying about the pick. So the Seahawks will make a pick at 45. This is the first time ever that we haven't seen a receiver go in the top 40 back-to-back years, or the top first round, and we've not had a running back taken in the top 40 for the first in 2 consecutive years for the first time in something like 30, 40 years as well. They're now showing a live feed of the Seahawks War Room. Pete Carroll sat there looking very relaxed. Walter Jones is coming out in a cream suit and an orange tie for some reason to make the pick, and Walter Jones getting a decent reception. So here's the Seahawks pick. This is what we've been waiting all the months to find out. Who's the first guy they're going to take? It's taken a little bit later than we thought. We're finally going to find out. Great reception for Walter Jones. Wow. So the Seahawks have taken a receiver, and they've taken Paul Richardson of Colorado, who is a player that I don't mind. He's 6 foot, 175. He's small. He's fast. He creates great separation, but he drops passes. Can make spectacular catches. I think Doug Baldwin speculated on Paul Richardson being the pick when he was on KGR earlier today, and not sure what they make of him tipping that. So, no Cody Latimer, no Dante Moncrief, no Martavis Bryant. The guy they take is Paul Richardson, which is a bit of a surprise to me. Very athletic guy, and I guess they just keep you guessing year after year after year. I mean, looking at his stats, he's 6 foot. They refer to him as 185 pounds on the NFL Network. He was 175 at the combine. He had a 38-inch vertical jump, 10'4" broad jump, which is very, very good. His leaping ability is explosive. His 40 time isn't too bad, 4:40. Had a hand time 4:35 with a 1:54 split, which is very good. But there are other things like he has long arms, 32 5'8" arms on a 6-foot guy is not too bad. But his hand size is tiny. Talking about smaller than 9-inch hands. So a very interesting pick for the Seahawks there. The Steelers immediately got their card in as well, and they're now making their pick, and they've gone to it. So the Steelers take Stephon Tuitt to go with Ryan Shazier. I'm not sure what people are going to make of the Richardson pick, and we'll get into it as well. People suggesting on Twitter that Pete Carroll may have recruited Paul Richardson, who was at high school in California, I believe, before going to Colorado. Davis Hugh, who was a great Twitter follow, refers to him as basically a poor man's Deshaun Jackson, which is it's not a bad description. It's not a bad description at all. He is similar to that, but as I mentioned, the most frustrating thing with Paul Richardson when you watch him on tape, go and watch the Oregon game. Go and watch him against Oregon, where he made some plays, but had one of the worst drops that you will see in college football last year, and that has always been his issue. He is very athletic, very talented, but he's going to drop the odd pass, and that is the problem with Paul Richardson. But he is, similar to the guys that they have. They haven't got a big receiver on the team, which is, why you would perhaps think they would have gone in that direction, because they lose Golden Tate. You think, are they going to get some size in there? Are they going to get that ideal split end? And what they actually do is just go with a very similar player to what they've got. Some of the other strengths that he has, I think that he's a very fluid runner. And you watch him get in and out of his breaks. His route running is better. I mean, I've seen people say that his route running isn't very good. I don't agree with that. I think that Paul Richardson's routes are pretty good. And, he can sell the deep ball. So he sells it. He sort of drives in, he slams his feet into the ground, pulls back up, cuts inside, he gets separation. So, I think that's one of the big positives that he had. He can catch the ball away from his frame. He definitely can do that. He makes those difficult catches. He will extend and make the play. He can go up and get the football. And he does make very spectacular catches. He absolutely does that. And, whatever production he had at Colorado, he did in not the greatest offense. But, there are some concerns that he isn't a physical guy. He's only 6 foot. He's 175 pounds at the combine. Is he going to be able to make the next step at the next level at the NFL? And is he going to be able to out-muscle guys? The Redskins pick is in at 47. Just a reminder, Seahawks will be back on the board at 64. Trent Murphy is Washington's pick at 47. So people were asking about Trent Murphy. He's gone at 47, which is a lot earlier than I thought. He would go in. Another pass rusher for Washington there. That is a little earlier than I thought. I'm just going to go through and have a look at some of the reaction here to the Paul Richardson. Paul Allen tweeting out, Seahawks select Paul Richardson, 6 foot, 4.3 speed, great hands, and a playmaker. Trying to see what other people are saying about this. Ian Rappaport says the Seahawks do their thing at number 45. They take Paul Richardson of Colorado, who can fly. Not a second rounder on many boards, and yet he ends with. Because that is what the Seahawks seem to do. Chris Mortensen says, Paul Richardson, Colorado, set school records with 83 receptions, 1,343 yards. High school teammate of Marquise Lee and Robert Woods at Sarah High School. So yeah, he's from that kind of background. He will have been recruited then by Pete Carroll, and Pete, when he came to the Seahawks, was saying that there was going to be a window where they knew who, they knew guys from recruiting them and from going through that for the high school stage at USC, and that eventually that would stop because time would pass and the guys that he recruited would no longer be coming into the NFL. So this may be sort of the last year when Pete can do that, and Paul Richardson, or perhaps next year there'll still be one or two guys, but Paul Richardson seems to be a guy that Pete Carroll recruited, or at least was aware of at USC, and those kind of memories stick. And if he has got a positive impression of that guy, you can kind of see why it happens. Jason Lacanfora was tipping picks on Twitter, as he's warned people that he will do. And he just said the Seahawks take Richardson. And people were saying on Twitter, which is quite funny to watch, is, well, which Richardson is it? Is it Antonio Richardson or is it Paul Richardson? And a lot of people assumed it was Antonio Richardson, the tackle, which it was not, obviously. And just seeing, there is an interview on the NFL Network with Paul Richardson that you can find as well that was held earlier today. I'm just flicking through some of these reactions. Yeah, I mean, this is another significant thing that we should probably talk about here. The value at receiver is pretty good, and they could easily get a good receiver at 64. Latimer's still there. The Ravens pick is incidentally, they've selected Timmy Jernigan. So this is where Timmy Jernigan comes off the board at 48. Pick after Trent Murphy. Latimer, who I thought was going to go in the first round, you get things right, you get things wrong in a draft. It is safe to say now that I overrated Cody Latimer because he's still on the board and we're at 49. If he comes off the board now, then it could still be a decent pick, but he's not gone in the first round and he's not gone in the first half of the second. But he's still on the board, and there's other players that are still on the board as well. It suggests to me that by taking Paul Richardson at that point, that they feel a degree of comfort with Michael Bowie, because they haven't gone with Morgan Moses. They traded down and missed on the chance to take Quanjo. They traded down last night with the chance to take Batonio. So you're talking about, 3 tackles they've essentially passed on. Maybe Morgan Moses will be there at 64. Who knows? But they've passed on at least 2 and maybe 3 tackles, which suggests to me that they are comfortable with Michael Bowie in that position, and that they felt that getting an explosive receiver is the best way to go. Let's have a look at some of the reaction on the blog then. A lot of messages have come in now, so apologies if I don't read yours out. Kurt says, what round did I have Paul Richardson going? 2nd or 3rd round? Definitely felt that there was a chance he could go in the 2nd. And, it's not a total shot that he's got in this range. It is a bit surprising, just based on, what we believed the Seahawks would probably go for, which was the bigger wide receiver. We thought that they already had, smaller, because 6 foot is smaller in this league. We thought that they already had guys like that. But clearly, that's what the Seahawks feel like, getting those explosive, sparky guys who can compete for the ball and get downfield and maybe take it out the backfield and work with Percy and sort of be creative like that. They feel that is the way to go. I just feel like, with the way that the NFC West defenses are, it is good to have a big guy in there, and the Seahawks don't have a prolific big tight end who they can throw the ball to. They don't have that sort of natural size out wide either. So I would have thought that they would consider that, but hey, there's still plenty of time. Why wouldn't they go receiver again at 64? Why wouldn't they? I mean, if that's for the Curse and Rice and Doug Baldwin, who sounds like he's going to get an extension but hasn't signed that yet, are all free agents next year. You can't totally rely on Percy Harvin or Rice to stay healthy. Is it an option? Maybe. Maybe you get that explosive guy in there. Maybe you get a true split end as well. Who knows? Um, let's read some of these. Jarhead says, cue the fail music from The Price is Right. Can't say that this pick gets me very excited. Cisco says, I have no idea how to react to that pick. It is so Seahawks. Troy says, should have traded back again to take Richardson. Kurt wants to know, do you think they could have traded down again to get him? It's hard to say. I mean, let's have a look at the other teams that were on the board afterwards. Pittsburgh, they like smaller receivers in Pittsburgh. They like sort of that speed and that explosion, so they could have gone in that direction. They took Stephon to it. Washington, unlikely. I mean, taking Deshaun Jackson. Baltimore, again, unlikely. Signed Steve Smith. The Jets were potentially an option. The Dolphins, maybe. Could they have traded down again? Perhaps, but you're talking about a couple of teams after them that would have been threats there. If you feel like at that point that you really want Paul Richardson and having maybe missed out on Easley and possibly some other guys already, then yeah, I think that's I think that is a fair thing to do at that point. You just take the guy. Drew says, love it. I've been banging the drum on Richardson for a while. The numbers he put up while being essentially the entire Colorado offense were off the charts. David says, not sure on this one, but JS and PC know best. If he's fast, him and Harvin can stretch the field for the Seahawks. Kate says, what kind of competitor is he? He's a competitor, Kate. He will fight for the football. Absolutely. The Jets pick is in. I think Chad Pennington is going to make the pick. Yeah, Chad Pennington is making the pick. Blog's a little slow at the moment. Hopefully it will rewrite itself pretty quickly. So the Jets have taken Jace Amaro. They needed to get a weapon. They took safety in the first round, and they get Jace Amaro, so they get a good big target for Geno Smith or Michael Vick, whoever they choose to start. In this kind of range, 49, that kind of pick makes sense. Right, let's look at some of your comments again. Kenny says the Richardson pick is underwhelming. Forrest says, I like it, would preferred Latimer, but I like it. Drew says, as a player, Paul Richardson is Deshaun Jackson 2.0, which at 45 is a steal. He didn't return kicks in college, but I suspect he feels that role right off the bat. How fast is he going to be when he has to add 25 pounds, says Brian. I don't think he's going to, I think he is what he is. You don't draft Paul Richardson to force him to put weight on. He's going to play at 175, 180 pounds. That's who he is. He's not the type of guy where you look at his frame and say, wow, he can't, he may be able to get a bit stronger. He may get up to 190, 195, but he's not going to be the guy where you get him up to 210. Absolutely not. Jarhead says, anyone listening to Rob should pay attention. Drops passes. Remember Colin Robinson, all the physical tools you could want, but couldn't catch a pass to save his life. I'm still scratching my head. So the 180-pound wide receiver is going to be run blocking and breaking tackles like Tate. Oh well, number 64 is coming up. He does drop passes. Go and watch the tape, get a draft breakdown, go and watch the videos. There's just every now and again, and I'm not just talking about it gets thrown his way and he spills one. I'm talking about, there was a throw, I'm sure it was the Oregon game, where they throw it up, he's wide open, he just has to catch the thing, and he could moonwalk into the end zone, and he drops it, and it's a horrific drop, and that is him, explosive but will drop the odd pass. Ben says, Baptiste or Moncrief, I would have been more excited about. Don says, underwhelming. I don't know. When I compare most of the top wide receivers, Latimer, Matthews, Bryant, are all better than Richardson. Aaron says, seems they valued speed over durability and winning the contested shots. They have Kurtz and Baldwin for it. So here's the Chargers pick. They traded up to number 50, swapping with Miami. And the Chargers have taken Jeremiah Ata-Ochu, who is, prototype 3-4 linebacker, decent player, great character. Problem with him was that go and watch if you want to learn more about Atachu, then go and watch the Miami game from last year, where he, on one play, exploded off the left-hand side, beat a man, got into the backfield, 7-yard sack. Just an incredible play. And then on the next play, they ran straight at him. He gets blown up by the right tackle, and they convert for a first down on 2nd and 17 running the ball. That is him. He got dumped on his backside 3 times in that game, and still was the only one causing any pressure on that Georgia Tech defense. He is what he is, and he is going to cause you some problems where he just gets dominated at times. I mean, Morgan Moses completely shut him down at Virginia, but then he has got that little spark. He has got the right attitude, and he has a lot of potential in front of him. The Chicago Bears are now on the clock at number 51. We'll see what they're going to do now. They took a corner in the first round, Kyle Fuller. A few more of these messages that you're sending in. Brad says, doesn't really return punts. This is Paul Richardson either. Really hope he pans out. Ben says, how is he going to get off press coverage? Drew says, Richardson had a lower drop percent passes than Bryant, Lee, Moncrief, and Benjamin. He certainly had too many drops, but there were worse numbers among players that a lot of people liked in this draft class. That's a good point, Drew. I think what I would say is that it's not so much that he drops a ton of passes, it's that he has ugly drops. There are drops that stick in your mind in a lot of his games, and that is more the thing. Stuart says, are you serious? Somebody taught me off the ledge. With all the training down, this, and then he swears, and then he says, short, skinny, small hands, lots of drops, but he has something. What is it? Cody Latimer, we will watch your career and remember this day. Ben says, reeks of Dion Butler, hope I'm wrong. Don says, JSPC has a history of missing on wide receiver picks. Missed on Chris Durham, who was a big, fast guy. You could argue similar to Cody Latimer. So they've gone for that type before. They didn't miss on Golden Tate, but they did miss on Chris Harper. Sometimes you get a guy you feed the ball to, then you can have some success with that. We're now going to see Mike Singletary, the former 49ers head coach, make the pick for Chicago. A lot of people say they would have preferred Cody Latimer. I just wonder, at the same time, I appreciate, and I do appreciate that people like Latimer because we've talked about him a lot, and you can watch the tape, and there's a lot to like there. But we didn't get into Paul Richardson to the same extent, and it's going to be good over the next few days to watch his tape, see what he brings. I'll have a post up later tonight. We'll watch some tape. I'll get it out there before we wrap up, and we'll get into this, and we'll have a look at what he really truly brings, because he's not a player that we spent a lot of time watching. The Bears have taken Ego Ferguson of LSU, defensive tackle. He's a 3 technique who just didn't show any of the explosive pass rushing skills that an Easley or a Donald show. So I'm not too concerned about either not getting a guy like Ferguson or Timmy Jernigan, who's also off the board now. Interesting that Lewis Nix is still on the board, isn't it? He's not come off the board at any point in round 2 yet. We're at 51 now. Coney Ealy's still there. Not surprised by that at all. Just a very average pass rusher. Says a lot when Trent Murphy goes ahead of you, running what he did. Jeff has sent us a message saying Football Outsiders playmaker rating, which is a regression-based predictive model, has Paul Richardson tied for 5th overall with Allen Robinson, behind only Cooks, Beckham, Lee, and Adams, and ahead of Watkins and Evans. So he's put a link to the article. I'm going to dig that out, and we'll have a look at what it says. K Street says, I didn't know much of Richardson, but his routes look really clean, better than any route Tate ran, with him and Harvin spreading the field. I think it opens things up real good. One of the things I can actually do on this service is I can watch a YouTube video while I'm talking to you guys on here. And you can't watch it, but I can see it. So I can maybe just have a quick look at some Paul Richardson tape and talk through it while we're sort of watching the last few picks before we get a 64. Let's watch his game against Colorado State. I've watched the Oregon games so many times. It was kind of the one I kept coming back to. Okay, so I've just accidentally put myself on mute there. I think you should be able to hear me now. I'm watching the Paul Richardson tape against Colorado State. Against Colorado, sorry. He plays for Colorado State. So, first offensive snap of the game, quarterback drops back, scrambles away from pressure, steps up in the pocket, launches it downfield to Paul Richardson, who is somehow, it looks like he's the only guy on the field. I mean, there is nobody near him. I'll be very interested to see how he got that open. But he was wide open there. So let's have a look. We're going to see his route here. Just sidesteps the defensive back, who passes him off to the safety. The defensive back has got his eyes in the backfield at this point and just completely leaves Richardson. The safety, it's a complete busted coverage. The safety doesn't see what the cornerback's done. The cornerback passes him off to the safety. The safety darts inside to follow somebody else. Richardson is all on his own. And it's one of the easiest touchdowns he will ever record. So, hard to give him too many props for that, but, good to see him score a big touchdown. So we've just seen a couple of snaps where the ball didn't come his way. The video is incredibly slow. Thrown up one to him on the sideline. Seahawks want their guys to win the red line on that occasion. A little high the pass, but he leapt ahead, got it. Good secure hands there. Made the tackle, was tackled for about 5-yard gain. He is playing outside a lot, which is important. One thing I didn't like about Jordan Matthews is he lines up in the slot all the time. Makes it easy to sort of exploit zone and get into the right areas. You want to see the guy outside for me battling. Took one outside now, a little bit of a wiggle there, gets past one guy, gets 3 yards on a throw into the flat in the backfield. He likes to get involved. He's pretty intense watching this video here. Run blocking on this occasion, not great as you'd expect. Okay, I want to pause this for a minute because okay, the YouTube video kept muting the microphone, so that might not work. We'll have a blog post. We'll get more into that tape afterwards. When the 2 picks are in for Seattle, I'm gonna shut down the Google Hangout, get onto a piece, keep an eye on what's going on elsewhere. It's pretty fun just sort of seeing what the Seahawks fans were sort of responding on Twitter to the pick, because it was just the pick is Richardson. And people were saying, is it Tiny or Paul? Nobody has any idea. So first it was reported to be Paul Richardson. Now they're saying it's Tiny Richardson. All these people talking about trying to tip picks and all of this. This is why you do better off just watching it and seeing it live. So here we go. Here's the Cardinals' next pick. The last few picks: Trent Murphy to the Redskins, Timmy Jernigan to the Ravens, Jason Morrow to the Jets, Jeremiah Ataochu to the Chargers, Ego Ferguson to the Bears, and now it is the Cardinals' pick. If you guys want to keep sending the messages in, we'll get through as many as possible. So the Cardinals have taken Troy Nicholas, which is fascinating because Bruce Arians' tight ends, they block. That is all they do. He does not use the tight end in his offense at all as a pass catcher. So to take one in the second round is a bit of a shocker because he's known for sort of finding those guys later on, just plugging them in, getting them blocking there. Seems to be like they've taken him to be another blocker. He's a big guy. He was 270 pounds at the combine. You could use him as maybe a guy who gets the occasional target, but I think he's mainly going to be a blocker for the Cardinals team. But Troy Nicholas off the board. Sort of the big 4 in terms of the tight ends are gone now. So that is there's going to be a huge drop there to the next tight end you'd expect going. Green Bay's pick is in. Still a lot of interesting guys on the board. Cody Latimer's still there. Moncrief and Bryant still there. So we'll look at some of the defensive players who are still on the board just to run through the list here. I mean, let's just run through each position. Jimmy Garoppolo, AJ McCarron, Logan Thomas, Mettenberg still there. Quarterback, no running backs have left the board yet. Carlos Hyde still on the board. Trey Mason, Bishop Shanky, Jeremy Hill, they're all there. A receiver, Moncrief, Adams, Robinson, Landry, Bruce Ellington, Martavis Bryant, Brandon Coleman, Cody Latimer. A lot of guys, a lot of talent still left. A receiver on the board. Tight end, you're probably going to CJ Federich or AC Leonard. AC Leonard might be the next one off the board, and that might not happen today. The defensive lineman, Morgan Moses is still there. Marcus Martin's still there. Gabe Jackson, the guard. Antonio Richardson. Trey Turner is a really interesting guy from LSU. Might be the best pure guard in the class. He's still there. We'll get into the defensive lineman in a minute. The Packers pick is in. In fact, we'll just quickly run through it. Lewis Nix is still there. Coney Ely, Kareem Martin, Scott Crichton. That's pretty much all of the big names that people would want to know about. And at linebacker, Chris Borland's still there, which is a shame for him because he's a really, really good player. It's just that he's small and he's got injuries. He's perhaps the best one on the board left in that sense. The Packers pick now is going to be announced. So this is 53, so we're 10 away from the Seahawks being back on the clock. Okay, so the Packers have selected Devontae Adams, the receiver from Fresno State. Very Green Bay pick, high character guy. Shade under 6'1" and 212 pounds. Great leaping ability, Devontae Adams. Fantastic leaping ability. Had a visit with the Seahawks, 39.5-inch vertical, but he's slow. He is slow. He doesn't run away from people. It's like he's running through treacle at times, or quicksand when he's trying to run away from people. But he gets up and gets the ball. Small hands, 9-inch hands. Okay length, not great strength. 14 on the bench press. So not an explosive player, but very productive at Fresno State and a Green Bay style player. So you can understand that pick for the Packers. Looking at the quarterbacks to the left, Jean-Baptiste still on the board, a player that the Seahawks I imagine would like, just not as early as people were projecting him to go. There's not a lot. I mean, Bashaud Breeland is pretty overrated for me. I don't see him going in the second round. Keith McGill, again, overrated. Too soft at 6'3", 211. Should play better than that. Rashard Reynolds, maybe the next corner off the board, or Pierre Desir from Lindenwood, maybe. But, you're looking, down the line at this, and this is where we're going to see a spot now where, the players that are coming off the board after some of these receivers start to leave now with Devontae Adams, the talent is not going to be quite as good as you saw in the early 40s. So we're now seeing the picture of Devontae Adams celebrating becoming a Green Bay Packer. I mean, if you're a receiver and you just got picked to play with Aaron Rodgers, you must be pretty stoked about that. So, and he's a good guy. He's a good guy, Devontae Adams. Some more of your messages. What are the chances Hyde comes off the board soon? Could see that. I'm surprised that there hasn't been a running back go, either it's Bishop Shanky or Carlos Hyde. So here's the next pick, Tennessee Titans. This could be a spot where a running back comes off the board, you would suspect. Mad Marcus compared Paul Richardson to Tavon Austin. O says they tried to trade down, or at least it looked like they did because they waited right to the end of the 7-minute count to make the pick for Richardson. Great. Well, Tennessee have taken Bishop Sankey, who's the first running back off the board, and I'm delighted to see that he's the first off the board because I think he's the best available here. Not the biggest, 5'9.5", 209 pounds from Washington, of course, local guy from a Seattle perspective. just a really fun player to watch. Just a really, really fun player to watch. And every time you watched Washington last year, he was doing something. And he's going to have a difficult job there. Sort of, if he is going to be the feature runner with his size in Tennessee, then it's going to be tough. Which is why you'd think maybe a Hyde would go before him. But he is shifty, and he avoids tackles, and he gets in there, and he moves around, and he cuts back, and he's good. The ball in his hands. So I like the pick. I'm not sure Tennessee are going in the right direction. Of course, it can be with Jake Locker there, with the Washington guy, but I'm not sure that the Titans have got the right front office staff in place to sort of build this team. They look a bit rudderless, but that hopefully Bishop Sankey will work out there because he is a good player. Vin says, like most of other posters on here, I'm speechless on paper. Sure seems like we could have done better with that pick. I'm not sure what the fascination they have with smaller receivers is. Obviously can't judge this one for a while. In John Schneider we trust. Burner says Richardson averaged 16.2 yards per catch as a senior. I'll have some of that. CD wants to know if he returned punts. I don't think he did at Colorado State. Here's Colin. Seems like most people hate the Richardson pick largely because Rob hasn't talked about him like he has Moncrief, Latimer, etc. Whether it's a bit of that, then maybe because we've concentrated on certain guys who are still on the board, and we've concentrated on the guys that essentially passed them by trading down. There may be a bit of that at stake as well. But I also think it's also that the idea of the taller, more athletic receiver is something that Seahawks fans were expecting. They thought that the Seahawks were going to go with a bigger guy because they have the smaller guys. We've got Percy Harvin, who's a smaller, the most athletic guy in the NFL in terms of a receiver. You've got that type of player. What the Seahawks haven't got is a red zone threat. I mean, how many times in the red zone did Russell Wilson lack options? And not only have you not gone for bolstering the offensive line out to just go and pound the thing in, you haven't added someone in that red zone who's going to go up there and just be a big target. And look, it was the Pro Bowl, so you need some context there, but look at the 2013 Pro Bowl when Russell Wilson was throwing it to Larry Fitzgerald and Vincent Jackson in the red zone. I mean, it looked pretty good, and the Seahawks have not got a big red zone threat. So I think, Colin, that may be the reason why people are complaining about this. Not to say that Moncrief in particular is a particularly good red zone threat, even at his side, although I think Latimer could develop into that. And hey, they're both still on the board. Seahawks are a few picks away from being back on there. Who knows? RJ says he's going to quit reading the comments for now. He wants to drink the Kool-Aid, and so he should be. The Seahawks have done so well in the draft, better than anybody else over the last few years. Just because a player comes off you don't expect, I don't think there's any reason for people to sort of fear it or worry about it. Be excited about it. That is what I would say.